What's going on, everybody? You are listening to the Co-Living Show. My name is Craig Curelop,
Miller McSwain.
and we've got an Insane in the Membrane episode for you today. Our good friend Travis Schwartz. Miller, what did you know about Travis before you knew about Travis?
Yeah, I think like a lot of the people that we brought on, I met him at the co-living cruise that I went on with Sam Wiegert's group last year. So just
Mm.
another testament, you guys should totally be at in-person events. A lot of the people we're bringing on here are people that we did meet in real life at conferences or cruises or whatever. But yeah, we kind of got introduced there. And most of our conversations were around the software and tech platforms because we're building Co-Living Pro. He's building this Pad Pulse software that you guys will hear about later in the episode that offers some kind of additional functionality to the PadSplit platform. So that's kind of all I knew before, but I had no idea that he bought 12 houses last year. Oh my God, talk about scale. Geez.
Yeah, 12 houses, 1 year, all co-living,
Mm.
and using PadSplit as the platform to help them scale. And so I think a lot of you guys know we're a bit notorious for not being on PadSplit. We've got our reasons for that, which we share in the episode. But Travis does make a compelling case as to why he thinks PadSplit is the way. And there's nothing like I said this at the co-living conference last year. It's like we're not right, he's not right, we're not wrong. It's just different, right? Like we've got different mindsets, different business models, and so we'll see what happens. But yeah, overall, man, Travis is such a good dude. I love him, and I know I saw him at Limitless conference last year too.
Mm.
It's funny, he does this exchange thing. We didn't talk about this in the episode, but it's a cool thing. Like at the Limitless conference, they do this exchange where people can he's got these Airbnbs and Steamboat that he offers like 10 days for free. And then other people will offer other things for free and they trade and be like, hey, I need 10 hours of legal services, or I've got a house in Hawaii, and they'll swap. And it's like a bartering system. It's pretty cool. And yeah, so I think he did that with a few people. And I don't know, when I think of Travis, I think of that system, which is like pretty random. But
Did you trade anything?
no, I was too chicken. And I don't have an Airbnb. We did like in our basement, but I don't know. Yeah,
Yeah,
no.
you
So
didn't offer him a co-living room. You didn't think the folks at Limitless wanted to.
maybe next year we'll offer a co-living room. Be like, live in a co-living experience
Yeah.
for 1 month. We'll let you do it for free.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool, man. But before we get into the show, we got to ask our question from the co-living community. If you're not already in this community, you got to get in there. But it's from our friend Monica K. Shippey. And so her question is, we have just been told by the city that in order to put an ADU in our 2-car attached garage, we have to tear up a concrete driveway and put up a curb in order to prevent parking in our driveway. What gives this is crazy? Do you know any workaround / idea?
That is crazy.
That is crazy.
Maybe I can
Yep.
give a few things, Craig, but honestly, I don't know if I'm going to nail this one. So be thinking in the background. So I guess one thing I would say here, different cities define ADUs differently and what's going to trigger that. So if we're thinking about co-living, at least when we do garage conversions, they're not usually tagged under this ADU zoning or restrictions or whatever. Because I think typically what triggers it is like when you're adding a kitchenette and making it actually a standalone unit where you could live totally by yourself. When we're doing our garage conversions, often it is just a bedroom or 2 bedrooms or whatever, but they still need access to the main house to use the kitchen and everything there. So I think in this sort of scenario, if you are doing co-living, maybe skip the kitchenette and instead just put a couple of bedrooms in there. And then that way it's not classified as an ADU. It's just additional square footage that you're now adding onto the house. And then maybe the driveway issue goes away under that.
Yep. Actually, I think that's a brilliant idea and probably even better than the one that I was going to say, because honestly, it's really hard to circumnavigate or do things that the code is the code, and the code enforcers don't do anything except read the code and then enforce it. They're not really like, they feel like they have power, but really it's just this document that powers everything. And what it says in the document, it says in the document. And unless you want to go through and do all the work to change that, and you've got to have a really valid reason as to why it's changed, then you kind of just have to realize, yeah, maybe the ADU is not the play. In which case, Miller's thing is like, hey, I want to add 2 bedrooms, and maybe it's a man cave type thing or whatever. And in which case, the driveway still needs to be there. You still get the extra rooms. And people honestly don't mind walking from the house to use the kitchen and bathroom, especially if they have a bigger, nicer, quieter kind of living space.
Yep. Cool.
Cool. Now, before we go into the show, if you are a real estate agent listening to this podcast, you got to come to the Investor Agent Summit in Denver, May 21st, 23rd. I'm going to be there. Miller's lame. He said he can't make it. He's got some trip or something planned with his wife, whatever. But I'm going to be there, and there's going to be a lot of really great information on how to acquire deals. Co-living is going to obviously be a big part of it because co-living is one of the only things that works around here, around anywhere these days in terms of investing and buying cash flow properties. Denver, downtown, May 21st, 23rd. I can't wait to see you there. Go to theinvestoragentsummit.com and get your ticket, and then drop me a DM at Craig Curelop when you get your ticket so I can make sure to say hi to you when you're there. With that being said, let's bring on our friend, Travis Schwartz. Travis Schwartz, welcome to the show, my friend. How you doing today, dude?
Thanks for having me. Good. Excited to be here.
We are excited to have you, man. We're excited to have you on. This is going to be a fun show, maybe a debate, PadSplit versus non-PadSplit. I'm excited to kind of hear your perspective, and hopefully we can leave this show friends.
maybe not. We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. Awesome, Travis. Why don't you tell everybody a little bit about who you are, like how you even got into real estate, co-living, and just kind of give people the background on who the heck is Travis Schwartz.
Yeah, short version. I've been basically a serial entrepreneur all my life. Been in multiple businesses all at once. Have really trimmed that down and trying to really focus. Really found real estate as one of the things that actually performed the best for me with the kind of least amount of headache over the years. And so when some stars aligned a few years ago and I had to refocus, I was looking for real estate and what made most money with the interest rates at the time. This is about 2.5 years ago. And came across co-living. At the beginning, looked doing it myself. And actually, to back up a little bit, prior to that, I was on e-com and a tech background, we'll say. Built a lot of stuff. When I got really looked at all the options, actually started out doing it on my own, going out and meet you guys and building leads and listing all the places. And I bought 3 houses all at once. So I kind of dove head first in a 30-day period, bought 3, found it easier to kind of do it in bulk, buy, renovate, and then kind of list, kind of simplified things for me. But yeah, did that for about a year. And with those 3 houses, just trying to get processes in place. And yeah, kind of went from there.
How'd you buy 3 at once? Usually people can only buy 1 at a time.
Like I've been a serial entrepreneur for a while. Been fortunate to kind of be in a good cash position at the time. I sold a building specifically at the time, a commercial building, and then recapitalized that across 3 houses. So had just enough to basically cover the houses and then the renovations for those.
Okay. Can we talk about those deals? What market did you decide on? How did you decide on a market? How did you decide on a house type? Run us through your mindset there.
Yeah, at the Dallas Fort Worth is my market, and that's where it was located, and so that was the main reason there. At this point, I have houses in a few different places, Tampa, but mostly in Dallas. How I selected them actually just the first time was through networking, and actually found somebody who was a little bit ahead of me in the co-living space, and I just became a realtor, and he's like, "Hey, I already bought 1 house. I only, to your point, have money right now to afford 1, but this is my runner-up." And so I ended up proceeding with him as a realtor there and got that first one under contract. And then my following 2, I just followed that methodology and found them in the DFW area.
Cool, man. And what were you looking for when you were trying to find these houses? Like, I want to go back and tell kind of newbie co-living Travis brain and figure out what you were looking for. And then also I want to understand how that transformed as you actually did it.
Yeah, the knowledge of what I was looking for actually came I joined the Scale Your Real Estate program. This is back in August of 2023. And that was really where I got a lot of the base level knowledge of what to do and what to pick. I'm trying to recall back, buy box being, I typically am looking for highest cash flow. So I'm pushing the limits a little bit more for most people. So I was looking for about a 2,500 to 3,500 square foot house, something. My target was 10 bedrooms that I could fit in it. And obviously I was shooting for under $50,000 per room after renovations. And so that's what I was looking for at the time. I've now shifted that's still similar to what I'm looking for, but I've now shifted down to I'm shooting for under $40,000 per room finished. So ultimately I've been able to achieve that I bought 12 other co-living houses last year, pretty much 1 per month following that methodology. And I know we're going to get into it, but mostly was able to do that because I decided building all the systems myself was not the way to go. And I flipped onto PadSplit.
Okay. We're definitely going to talk about that, but I want to also talk about $40,000 per room. Like, are you leaving any room for living rooms or anything like that? Or are you chopping up the house and get as many bedrooms as you can out of that?
So I have them both ways. At that time, kind of following the methodology I learned, I was leaving a common space, right? So obviously you have the kitchen, then you have a kind of common living room. I've kind of gotten a little bit away from that nowadays. I try to leave a little bit of a common space, but I've realized if it has an exterior window, that ultimately needs to be a bedroom. And I've done some interesting things like entirely move a kitchen to the inside of the house to make where the kitchen was a bedroom in some of the more recent builds. But yeah, I do have the common spaces.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Travis, talking about the exterior window. If you can position a bedroom in a place with the exterior window, awesome. Now you're not having to build an egress window or operate it illegally or whatever. So we've seen some other scenarios like that maybe listeners should be aware of. So like we've looked at floor plans where, yeah, the living room that's on the main level of the house with all the exterior windows like you're talking about. Awesome. We do want a common space. So like at first we're like, all right, let's keep this. But then as we continue looking around the house, maybe in the basement, there's another living room type area, but it doesn't have an egress window. Well, cool. We could convert either of those to a bedroom, but it would be easier to convert the one upstairs because we don't have to dig out a new well and do all of that. So I think that's a good point, kind of thinking about the floor plan and where you should prioritize bedrooms versus the common space just from a remodel budget perspective. So I think that's a good point.
What is the cost to move a kitchen though? That feels really expensive.
So I think it really depends, like if the kitchen needs to kind of be redone anyways, right? So in our case, it's important. It worked out that the gas line for the oven was on the exterior or on the interior wall. So we really just put the oven on their side and plugged it on their side. So like we were already replacing the kitchen needed to be replaced as far as like cabinets went and etc. So it wasn't that much more. And I really just had to change a little bit about one of the corners of the wall to make it work. But I get pretty into the floor plans. Is actually, I think, one of my personal specialties is getting that and cutting it up. And I've gone through and created a hallway where a water heater was, as an example, in order to make a floor plan work. But yeah, it's not that much more if you're already replacing the kitchen, maybe $1,000 or something.
Yeah. So let's talk about remodels for a sec, because I think a lot of investors wonder how deep should they go in remodels? Should they be looking for a 6-bed house and then just adding 1 bedroom versus looking for a 3-bedroom house and adding 4 bedrooms? Kind of what's your approach there, Travis? And would that advice change depending on your experience level?
I think the biggest driver is like how much cash you have to do the renovation, right? That's your first limiting factor you got to think about. So if that's a restraint, you're kind of limited to what you can do. If that's not a restraint, then I think you're probably better off going for what's the best long term, which would include flipping kitchens or adding additional windows, what have you. There's a lot of different options you could do. I definitely learned from the first time around not to go with the cheapest person. In all 3 of my houses, those original ones, I still to this day have CapEx things popping up that are basically due to shoddy work, we'll say, and that price that was nearly half the cost of what I was quoted from other people at the time. So on those first original houses, to throw you some numbers, we bought a house for about $350,000, and we had about $60,000 in renovation total, which included graveling the whole backyard and for parking, which was roughly like $8,000 of that. Whereas nowadays, most of my builds are 120. I spent over $200,000 on a renovation, but that's on a house I bought for 200, 220, right? And so we're still arriving at kind of like a 10, sometimes 12 rooms. But yeah, the answer to the question depends on how much you're limited to start with.
Do you know your number on like how much you put into it versus how much value you're truly adding to it?
Yeah, it's a great question. And where we see that is on the refis. So in the beginning, I was doing more of the approach of just buy it under standard financing, pour all the money in the refi, and don't change the original loan. Nowadays, I'm buying more houses that need a lot of work. I'm buying them in cash, sometimes in hard money, and then doing the renovations and refining out. So it really depends on the deal. Ultimately, to me, because of my intent is to hold long term, I don't really care if I have negative equity in a sense at the gate, because I'm here for the cash flow and eventually it'll appreciate and eventually there'll be a higher level market for this type of product, in my opinion. And I have seen it where I have to be able to buy really good and have a really good renovation for me to essentially have it worth what I have into it. It's only happened once or twice. Most of the time I'm 10, 15, 20% in negative equity in a sense.
Okay. So if you put 200,000 into a deal, you may only be adding 100,000 of value. And so,
Yeah,
but the long term of that, like your thesis here is not to flip. Your thesis here is to hold this for 10, 15, 20 years, generate enough cash flow to make up for that difference in equity. And eventually your loan will be paid down enough and the property will just naturally appreciate enough to where you will capture some back.
yeah, exactly. And I also anticipate that the loan environment for this, similar to how Airbnb changed, will eventually change. I have a portfolio of 5 Airbnbs as well. So I've been doing that for 6, 7 years. So it took a long time of that being a real business model before banks really started to recognize it. So following that mindset, 3 to 5 years from now, there will be loan products more so based off the cash flow. So I'm not too worried about it. There's a lot of different options. You could sell it if you needed to, and somebody just has to kind of pay you for the negative equity in a sense because they're valuing the cash flow anyways.
Right. On the purchase, because it sounds like you've bought things that are relatively turnkey where you're just adding a few bedrooms, and then also you've done full gut remodels, changing things. What do you feel is the more effective?
Again, it goes back to the question of the cash you start with, right? So if cash is not a constraint, definitely the more effective one is buying the most dilapidated house, in my opinion. Obviously, you don't want it falling over, but I've been able to get super deals on houses that have issues, right? They're listed with having issues, and then we'll get another 30+% off. I've bought a 3,400 square foot house for 190, but I put
Wow.
230 into it, right? And then I just appraised it at 420. So that's one of the best ones that it appraised for exactly what I have into it,
Right.
but it's
But that includes
14
all your
rooms.
bedrooms and stuff. Right.
Yeah, that includes everything, but it's 14 rooms. That math is 420 divided by 14. It's under $30,000 per room.
Did the appraiser take off any value for having unnecessary bedrooms?
In that particular case, no, because of the way we approached it, but still, technically it's overbuilt for the area. So that was still an issue where I thought we could have got more. I thought I was actually going to be able to pull most of my money out while still having 20% equity in, but the math just didn't work out, and it kind of is what it is. I'm prepared to leave money into them if I need to.
Yeah, so I kind of just want to highlight for the listeners, I guess this isn't quite a question, but kind of just want to highlight this negative equity thing that we're talking about here. So I think this happens to loads of co-living investors, and I think that they don't even really realize that it's going on, because we did some remodels before I kind of realized what was going on here. So just to kind of break it down a little bit for folks, when we talk about co-living remodels, there's definitely things that we do that add value, right? So if we're doing, this $80,000 remodel and we're adding bathrooms, cool, that probably does add value to the property. So you spend $4,000 and probably get a little bit more value out of that. But there becomes a point when we're adding things, even going from 3 bedrooms to 5 bedrooms, probably useful. But a lot of our money is spent on building these additional bedrooms. And if you were to look at a graph, probably once you get to 6 bedrooms or so, you're probably kind of peaking out as far as the property value goes. There's still demand for 4, 5, and 6 bedroom houses. But when we get to 7, 8, 9, 10, things really do start to get a little bit weird, because really what all your property value is, hey, how much is someone willing to pay for this? And how many people out there are willing to pay for a 10 bedroom house? Like, not many. So it starts to have diminishing returns, like potentially going the other way. So once you're up to your 6 bedroom count, every $5,000 maybe that you're spending on building a bedroom may not necessarily be adding value at that point. So that's what we're talking about here, and why Travis is saying that, yeah, you do need to hold these things for the long term if you're doing remodels like that. Like I've talked about here on the show, converting garages. And our market probably doesn't really add value. So we really need to be thinking, hey, if we spend 20 grand on this and it makes us an extra 10K a year, we really have to hold this thing for at least 2 years and potentially more for this to actually make sense for us. So just wanted to highlight that.
Exactly. Yeah. And to throw in a little bit on there, I think that adding the garage conversion specifically helps some, but not as much as you put into it, right? Because you're getting more under air permitted square footage. So it's helpful there. But there, a lot of things. Another big one that I've dumped money into is outdoor exterior gravel or parking, etc. You could spend 10,000 on that almost pretty easy, and you get nothing for it from an appraisal standpoint.
Do you have investors or do you use all your own cash?
I had some minority partners in the beginning. Actually, on my first 3 houses, technically, I had 10% partner on 2 of them and a 50% partner on another one. I've since bought out all those partners. The smaller ones at my request, because at 10%, it just didn't quite make that much sense. And the 50% was at my partner's request due to some other financial constraints. But at this time, no, I have no partners on any of my homes.
Okay. I guess curious do you plan to ever use partners, or are you going to keep it simple?
I've dabbled with going that way a couple times, and it gets complicated. Honestly, from my other business ventures, I've lost, frankly, millions of dollars from bad partnerships where partner screwed me one way or another. So I'm a little PTSD shell shocked from those experiences. I wouldn't say I'd entirely rule it out, but I haven't found the need to do it. I've been fortunate enough from a cash standpoint to not really have to go that route, where some people, in order to scale, that's the only option.
Yeah.
Sure.
And I think one way that you're able to scale here, Travis, if we were to compare your strategy versus how me and Craig are doing things right now, you are doing these refis and pulling a lot of capital out that you're able to recycle and continue to purchase. Like you said, you're probably not pulling all of it out, but you're getting some back. Versus Craig and I, for us to purchase these, we are often just bringing in new capital with new partners, and that's how we're doing it. So these are two different ways you could scale, and you can mash them together and then super scale, but it's just another route to scale by pulling your capital out.
Exactly.
I'm curious because a lot of our listeners are going to want to partner. And I think it's always nice to share some horror stories on that. Do you mind sharing what happened with your partnership? And then also, were there any red flags looking back 2020?
Are you thinking like the partnership within real estate, or my other partnerships non-real estate related?
Your non-real, just partnerships in general, the non-real estate ones, the one that you're thinking of that really screwed you.
Yeah. Honestly, probably can't get into too many details, but I think the biggest takeaway I had is I have this concept. I call it the entrepreneurial age. And I think looking back, that was a big component of it. So most people might assume like, all right, if let's say, as an example, someone's 30 and someone's 50. And the assumption is, yeah, this 50-year-old has more experience, whatever, what have you. They end up owning more of the business, more than 50-50. So in my case, it was like a 70-30 split. Technically in age, my partner was older than me, but in entrepreneurial age, actual business experience, he was, we call it a child compared to maybe I was a teenager. And so looking back at that, if I would have had more equity or control of the business, I believe that the outcome could have been vastly different. But there was multiple times where a decision needed to be made. Instead of thinking about it strategically based on experience, the other partner threw a temper tantrum and didn't make a decision. And ultimately, at the end of the day, it cost me millions of dollars and about 4 years wasted time. So that's probably my biggest takeaway. As far as the real estate side goes, I think the biggest thing easiest would be to match cash in and experience and put those together to come up with something that makes sense, but always have an out built into the contract before you start.
From the hindsight is 2020 perspective, like obviously there was stuff that you were blind to going into that partnership, but now that it's done, were there things in the beginning that you were like, dang, I should have saw that? And what were those things?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is allowing me to not be 50% ownership, right? And not having a way to convert to equity. So a major problem is I shelled money into the business to start the business, but we had already kind of established, hey, this is my percentage, this is the partner's percentage. And we were putting money into the business based on, an interest rate that I would get back. That just accumulated on a balance sheet until it exploded and got erased to zero. If I would have made them convertible notes, which I would have had to go to an attorney and do. So I didn't really use attorneys at the time. And now you use attorneys for everything. So if I would have had convertible notes as we were going along, I'm like, hey, I'm not getting paid. I'm converting this. I'm pulling this convertible note. And then I get more equity. And if that would have done in place, I would have ended up with more than 50% control. And then I would have been able to make the decisions. So ultimately, having cash as convertible is a different business. So it's not necessarily exactly the same for real estate side, but the business grew exponentially. We grew 500% a year and went from 0 to 50 employees over the course of 15 months. So it was pretty wild. And when you grow that fast, like that's I guess that's the other takeaway. Growing too fast is dangerous. I've not seen it. I've seen it many times after that happened to me, and I can watch for it. And I know other operators in almost every line of business that have had that problem that caused an implosion. You can only fly a rocket so fast before you sometimes explode.
For sure. Miller, can you confirm that if you fly a rocket too fast, it explodes?
If you were in the atmosphere and you flew it too fast, it would eventually. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Once you're in space, though, New rules.
Sky's the limit.
Yeah, the sky is not the limit.
True. Yeah. At what point do you leave the sky in your in space? Is there a moment or is it a transition?
Yeah, it's definitely technically a transition, but there is a limit that we apply to it. It's called the Kármán line. I think it's at 100 kilometers. So whatever that is in miles, but you can tell it's super arbitrary because they're like, oh yeah, we're kind of in this region. Oh, 100 kilometers is in there. That sounds good.
If anything's a round number, like 6 feet or 100 kilometers, then it's probably a pretty arbitrary thing.
Yes.
Little COVID jab in there for you guys. Okay. So you got these houses. So I want to kind of get back on track here with, you got the houses. We kind of understand how you got them, what you looked for. You're looking for extreme cash flow in these cash flowing markets, like in Texas and all that. And you base your whole business model off PadSplit. Give us the reasoning.
So I didn't originally, right? And so to give a little bit of other concept on the underwriting, right? So when I was underwriting houses beyond just the $40,000 and under per room, which I originally started at 50, I also wanted $3,000 a month in cash flow. Partly that was my number. I was doing that because I wasn't including, I was self-managing, so I didn't have a management fee at all. But I since do bake that into my underwriting just in case I want to go that route. And I was running like a 10%, or I think at the time 12% vacancy rate just to underwrite. So those were some of the numbers that I was looking for. So I onboarded. In total, we had 30 rooms between those three houses. All of them were 10 bedrooms. One was like a 10.5.5. One was a 10.4. Another one was a 10.4. And so that was the duplicate of all three at the same time. I went live with all of them in roughly March of 2024. So almost exactly 2 years ago. And really built out all the systems. Because I came from a tech background, I was like, all right, let's use ClickUp. I was one of the, I'll call it the original OGs when ClickUp was like founded. Used it for my e-commerce business. So I had kind of a really stable knowledge of how to set that up for our use case. And then following the things I learned in the Scale Real Estate course, we were on all the different platforms, right? From Facebook to Roomies and all the other ones that you guys, I'm sure, talk about regularly. And really what I found is there's a lot of education, right? As you have to, half the people you talk to didn't read what the description of the listing. They are looking for multiple people. They have pets, etc. They're not single, whatever. They have a multitude of reasons they don't qualify for. And so ultimately, in the year of 2024, we processed 3,000 leads to keep our 30 rooms about 82% full. That was my experience. I had 4 staff overseas, two part-time, 2 full-time to help me maintain that. And my original goal for 2024 is I wanted to buy 7 houses for the year. But I was like, I'm not buying more until I get the systems figured out. I spent like 9 months and couldn't get them to the way that I wanted them. So I was frustrated. And so I said, this is backwards from my intent. I want to own more properties. I want to meet a certain cash flow goal. So I said, I'm going to step back and I'm going to move on to PadSplit. I'm going to buy the houses and that I want to get to. And then maybe eventually I can switch back because I'll have the kind of cash flow to support that kind of flip back. So that was moving into 2025. So February 2025, about a year after I had started, I moved all my properties and all my current members and number houses over to PadSplit, which was quite the process. Took about 45 days. But things just simplified almost overnight by doing that. I was able to cut my team in half. Also at the time, I had a new baby that was born a little early, so that threw me off in late 2025. But yeah, switching on to PadSplit, officially got on there in February of 25. And then it just became, all right, let's shift back to buying. And then I bought houses in sets of 3 every time. So I bought 3 houses and closed that next month. Got those up and renovated, bought 3 houses in July, and then bought 3 houses again in October. So always doing it in those sets. I just found that was greatly simplified things because I'm always in the same mindset. It's like, all right, contract closing, renovations, getting live. And I found that to be super helpful.
Okay. Yeah. So Travis, you mentioned that it simplified your operations and your marketing and you were able to cut your team. Do you remember what specifically simplified or what parts of your process went away that PadSplit was now able to come in and fill that void?
Yeah, the biggest one that made the most time saver is just getting you people in your room, right? They've already done the education. They've already vetted people. There's arguments of how well they vet. That part doesn't really matter at the moment. But they went from, we had to process roughly 3,000 leads to fill 30 rooms, right? That's 100 people per room that we had to talk to, vet, do this, a huge amount of time, to where we now said, hey, when somebody applied, they were already ready to book to the room. So PadSplit's biggest factor of benefit is trust, right? They're a big platform. They've been around a while. They have all these other benefits. And so people already go on there and they know what they're getting into. And I think that was for sure the biggest thing, is just we went from one person applying to one person moving in versus 100 applying to 100 to one moving in. Obviously, all the other things that they frankly had, whether it's of benefit with messaging or payments, things like that, we already had those pretty much operating. So there maybe was a couple dollars, not insignificant amount of money in savings from like the software tool. But a lot of people getting into this don't have the capability to build a lot of the stuff that we built. So PadSplit does, with all the things that they maybe don't have or could do better, they're still vastly easier if your goal is to scale. Now, if you're in the mindset of, I have limited cash, I can only buy one or two, and I want to make the most money on those two, potentially the route is to just self-manage, in my opinion. But once you try to really start scaling out, personally, I think you're better off focusing on acquisition and less about operations in the beginning. If I get to 30 homes, I may be able to then revert back to, okay, let's bring it all in-house and operate that way.
Hey guys, the tool I've been talking about forever, Co-Living Pro, is now officially live. So some of the biggest problems that I've encountered around co-living are always on the marketing side. So you can think of Co-Living Pro as a marketing software or a tool to help you overcome some of these marketing issues that we all run into in the co-living space. So number one, it helps you determine what to price your room at and then how to change that price over time. And that's actually a free tool. You can go there to colivingpro.io, and there's a little like rentometer type tool where you can punch in an address, punch in a zip, punch in a city, and kind of see what rooms might rent for there. But it does that for you. And number two, historically, for us to keep our rooms operating at full capacity, especially when we're off of PadSplit, it's meant that we had to post on Zillow, post on Zumper, post on Apartments, post on Roomies, post on all these places. And with just a 5-bedroom house, that's already 20 listings right there, which is a lot of work, a lot of time and effort. So Co-Living Pro helps you solve this. You just make your listing on this one site, and it pushes it to Zillow, pushes it to Zumper, and we even support any platform with the manual listing manager. So you can still be on Apartments, still be on Roomies, still be on PadSplit, still be on anything. And it's kind of a wizard that helps you stay organized, your VA stay organized. It shows you what rooms need to be posted where with just quick copy-paste prompts. Copy your rent over, copy your description over, boom, you're good to go. And number three, historically, now that you're on all these sites, we always had to hop in daily or at least weekly to keep these listings up at the top, keep the pricing up to date. So Co-Living Pro solves that for you too. It's making those adjustments for you on a daily basis, even an hourly basis, to make sure your listings are updated across your platforms. So you guys know everything I've always done has been free. The community is free. This podcast is free. I'm super proud of that and definitely going to keep doing all that. But this tool is paid, but I feel comfortable doing that because the numbers are honestly pretty insane. So if you go to Co-Living Pro, there is a calculator where you can do this for your own situation. But let's take that example earlier of the 1 5-bedroom property. From that, we estimate you'll make an extra $1,400 a year in extra rent and reduced vacancy. And that is 5x what the tool costs. Let me say that again. This tool produces 5x the return of what it costs. So in this example, that's actually a better return than most co-living properties themselves, being around 15, 16%. So seriously, to me, this is a no-brainer. I think you should totally go sign up, especially right now. We have limited time founders pricing, so it's 50% off for life. Whenever you add a property, that property stays 50% off for the first 100 signups before the end of April. So head over to colivingpro.io. This is the tool that I built for my own business, and I'm so happy that I can finally share it with you guys. And back to the episode.
If you had a room, if you had a house with 10 bedrooms, could you put them all on PadSplit, but then also market them off PadSplit? Or are you exclusive to PadSplit?
Yeah, so all rooms in the house have to be on PadSplit, but if you can, and you're encouraged to market them off PadSplit, which we still do. But it's not a massive focus of mine, to be honest. But if you bring them in, you basically save, for everybody that does know PadSplit, you take 8%. They charge you 8% of the ongoing fee, but then they take your first 10 days of booking. We'll just say that's roughly $300 to $350. So if you bring in your own lead from Facebook Marketplace and they move in, you save that booking fee. So it effectively saves you about $300 for everyone that you find yourself. But then, of course, you have to have the time and the team to do that. So it's a trade-off.
Yeah. Gotcha. And so are you limited? You're limited to only places where PadSplit is present, right?
Yes and no. You can technically put any house anywhere on PadSplit. They'll let you, but you don't necessarily get some of the other benefits, such as their advertising. So if you go one of their core markets, which I think at this point they have 40 or 50 core markets that they do run advertising in. But if you were in the middle of nowhere, per se, you could list your own property on PadSplit and people would be able to find it and book it. But PadSplit's not going to necessarily spend money helping people see it in those non-core markets.
I see. So anybody can post on there, and and if you're on there, so if you're on there and you get your own tenants, then it's just the 8% flat. And then if they help you procure, then it's the 10 days plus the 8% flat.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay. What happens what happens if PadSplit doesn't do its job? It doesn't help you fill the rooms. What do you do?
To be honest, that I have operated a higher occupancy with far less work since I switched on to them. But to the point of if they're not able to fill your rooms, ultimately it generally comes down to, are you doing everything on PadSplit correctly that you should? So I take this from my Airbnb or honestly my Amazon days. So I sold on Amazon for a decade prior to any of the other stuff I've mentioned earlier in the episode. And taking from Amazon and like properly marketing your listing and then advertising it, being priced correctly, like highlighting the benefits and things like the features, bringing that over is generally, okay, am I doing that correctly on PadSplit? PadSplit has host success managers at different levels, depending on how many homes you have. I believe, I'm not sure if you get one if you have one, but you may. And shout out to Motaz, my host success manager. Super awesome, super helpful, and is able to troubleshoot with you in that case. So we've done it a couple of times when I thought things weren't working to the way that I thought. And ultimately, it generally comes down to, if you've got your listing marketed, your images look good, and all your content's there, the question is price. Are you priced competitively? And there's different tools within PadSplit to help you understand if you are priced competitively for a city or even a zip code. And one of the things I think I learned over time about the co-living market is, in my opinion, having a high amenity house, you're not going to charge more for it. Like, I actually have something I've done that's interesting is I've actually put vanity sinks in rooms so that the room has their own vanity sink. I've done this in one house in 4 out of the 10 rooms. They have their own vanity sink. That's an extra amenity. Roughly at the time, because it was a pier and beam, like it's easier to add these, roughly $500 a room to add that. And I see it as a benefit. People can brush their teeth, they can get water. It helps alleviate a little bit of pressure on bathrooms, maybe the kitchen. But ultimately, I found I can't charge more for that. I could try, but then I'm priced $15. I tried to price $15 a week more than kind of local competition. And ultimately, people don't book those rooms. But if I price the same, obviously people book them, but then I believe I'll have a higher likelihood that they stay, because that's a benefit that no one else has. So that, I think, comes down to, in a long-winded way, it's a very price conscious customer.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah, Travis, I think you hit the nail on the head. So I hear people talk about, amenities, hot tubs, whatever, sinks in the room. That's a cool one. Otherwise, the other one that I hear people talk about, hey, how many rooms should I build private baths for? And it sounds like, oh yeah, if you have the budget, the ROI makes sense. Cool. Let's turn like all 8 or 10 bedrooms into private baths, because that would yield more cash flow, is what it looks like. But I've kind of seen what you're talking about there. This sort of demographic that we're marketing to is financially constrained, right? They have a limit to how much they can spend. The affordability is the number one thing on their mind. So when we add all these amenities, just like you're talking about, I think it mostly affects the length of their stay, and not so much your cash flow directly by the rents, more about lowering your turnover.
Yeah. And a little off topic, but another thing that I've learned that I think is valuable, and it applies to either self-management or on PadSplit. If you have a member who's lived in your house who's you'd like to keep, and then they tell you that they're going to move out, no matter what they say, whether they say it's financial or they say they're moving for some other reason, their grandma needs help, always offer them a discount to stay. I just did this recently. It probably works at least half, maybe 2/3 of the time, where the person told me they're moving for some reason. I say, hey, you've been a great member. We'd like to keep you for a 10% discount. Would you stay? And they're like, oh yeah. and I've got them to cancel a transfer. PadSplit has a transfer system in order to stay with us. And ultimately, you're just weighing the math. If they leave and I have to pay a new 10-day fee on PadSplit, that's $300. Plus, I have to pay to clean it, turn it, maybe fix something. Let's just rack it up to $500. I only gave them $25 off per week in that discount. So ultimately, if they would have left, I'm 20 weeks ahead, right? Based on that $500 divided by 25. So that's something that we've been doing that seems to really work. No matter what they say, offer them a discount. Unless they're a problem member and you'd like them to leave, then say, thanks, have a good day. But yeah, I want to throw that in.
That's a really good nugget.
Yeah, Craig, I have it written down. So
I was gonna say, no, you got that one?
Yeah. Yeah. So
luckily we're recording this and we can always look back on it.
Yeah. So. Yeah. No, that's crazy. But 70, like over half. Wow. Yeah. I would never guess.
It's crazy.
So, over half. For the ones that we wanted to keep that we offered it to. Right. Yeah. I'm not counting the ones where we wanted them we wanted them to move on.
Cool. Okay. So Travis, so it sounds like PadSplit makes it easier. I would say my view on PadSplit, which I think is a little different than yours, is 1 to 2 makes sense to not be on PadSplit. Like 2 to 10 or 20 makes sense to be on PadSplit. But anything more than that, it then makes sense to not be on PadSplit, because at some point, what you're paying at scale doesn't make sense. And then number 2, and the biggest thing that I can't get over the fence on, is that you've got a single point of failure along a big portfolio if you've got like over 20 houses. And so like, how do you feel comfortable around something like that?
Yeah. So for one, I would have put in feedback to PadSplit, and I hope they take into account, because ultimately, if you look at what are PadSplit's long-term goals and what are the host's long-term goals, what you just said is accurate. At scale, I'm paying them so much money, like why is the question. But the people who have the most houses on their platform ultimately gives them the most members, which is helping them scale as a business. So what I believe would make the most sense for PadSplit is to have a tiered system. So let's say when you have 1 or 2 houses, you're paying 8%, but ultimately when you have 5 houses, maybe you're at 7%. When you have 10 houses, you're at 6%, and so on and so forth. So it would incentivize, because it really would hurt them if all of their biggest players and biggest people that had 10, 20 houses were like, I'm paying you too much, we're out. It could really decimate their business. So it'd be a smart business decision to shift their pricing, maybe as discounted booking fees. Try to keep your biggest fish. Ultimately, they might do it. They would be smart if they do. So that's to answer that. As far as the risk in one boat, ultimately, a lot of things are like that. Airbnb, I guess I technically could say my short-term rentals, I'm on VRBO and I'm on Airbnb, but in that market, 85% of our income comes from Airbnb. So I'm still there. Before I was on Amazon, there was a time where we were selling near $10 million a year on Amazon. That was the only platform. Most people in the Amazon space, 95% of their income is Amazon. So it's the same thing. The likelihood that the biggest person fails is pretty slim. And ultimately, if it did, then you'd pivot. And like when one person falls, it brings up opportunity. If PadSplit disappeared tomorrow, your guys' rocket company is going to go through the roof, and you're going to have 10,000 rooms to manage. And I'm sure Miller will help figure that out. So I don't think it's going to be like a, oh my God, the sky's falling moment ever. I think that always things pop up if there were issues to happen. So I'm confident that ultimately there'll be different platforms and it'll be secure.
Cool. Hey, Travis, let me ask you about maybe some lesser known things that I found out about PadSplit and just kind of get your thoughts on them. One, I learned this from a guy probably 6 months or 10 months ago, and this is something I was unaware of. So with PadSplit, I've heard that you cannot start advertising for a new tenant until the previous until the previous member is totally moved out and the room is cleaned and totally ready to be moved into. Have you seen that in your experience, or are there ways around it, or kind of how do you play that?
Yeah, as far as on PadSplit goes, they won't show the room is available until the person's moved out, you've cleaned it and marked it as ready, right? And then it appears. But I've also had that happen and somebody book it within 3 hours. Like that's happened at that speed. I've also had rooms that are sitting 70 days later. So not saying that there's it. And I think that really depends on like the region. Like certain areas are pretty saturated than others. And so there's that front. So it's true on PadSplit, what you just said. However, there's really nothing that prevents me from advertising a room. Like I have rooms that are advertised on other platforms to drive leads all the time, regardless of if I have any empty rooms in the house. Because a lead for me, because I have so many houses in the area, a lead that comes in, I could just, because I always have an empty room somewhere, right? So ultimately, and if somebody says, oh, I want to be in this city and I don't have a room available, I can still refer them to PadSplit. You have a referral link, and they might go on and book one of Craig's properties, right, as an example, on PadSplit, and I still get paid. So I still get paid on PadSplit even if they come in and book somewhere else. So having a kind of always on engine outside of PadSplit, it still works, and there's different ways to think about how that benefits you.
Yeah. Yeah, that is a good point. So, and then let's talk a little bit about saturation, because you mentioned that one. So I've kind of seen this in some PadSplit markets, like they're primarily driven, my understanding is by paid ads. So like whenever they're in Atlanta, where they have lots of houses, they dump so much money into paid ads to where, I guess one view of saturation, if you want to be on PadSplit, you might get drowned out a little bit. But then also if you want to be off of PadSplit, all of a sudden, like you go to Google and look for a room for rent, and like you're totally drowned out there. So similar thing that I've seen in Houston. So whenever Craig was kind of talking about this framework earlier of, hey, which I mostly agree with, like the first couple of properties, you could probably be worth it to be off PadSplit. You're being scrappy, you're bootstrapping this thing, and you want to spend less on fees, and you want to do this yourself. Once you get beyond that, then yeah, I think the PadSplit question pops up. But the question that I always have is, hey, can we operate this property in this market without PadSplit, or is PadSplit already so domineering here that it would be difficult to advertise elsewhere? So of these markets that you're in, I think you mentioned Dallas, Fort Worth, and Tampa. How are you viewing the saturation? Is that affecting you getting your rooms filled up at this point? And do you think that it could even be like possible to go off of PadSplit in the markets that you're in?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and I want to elaborate on something. What you're saying is, I agree with kind of the 1 to 2 on your own, and then the big chunk, and then maybe not. I think what it really ultimately, though, instead of saying, it comes down to what is your intent. If you have the motive and the capital to be like, I'm getting to 10, right, and you know that's going to happen, you're going to get to 10 way faster if you don't try to do 1 and 2 on your own. If you just like, when I know I'm going to get to 10, just skip trying to figure out all these other things, go on PadSplit for 1 to 10 and focus getting to 10. It's if you think I have to kind of get 1 and 2 operational, I have to get the most juice out of the orange, then yes, you're probably best to. But there's a lot of time wasted in setting up systems and figuring and testing stuff out if you're going to ditch it on house 3.
Good point.
To answer your question on saturation, I think for me, like it's not necessarily like Dallas, Fort Worth. I've been watching PadSplit since we started. When I got into this 2 years ago, there was like 300 rooms total in Dallas. I think there's over 2,000 now in 18 months later. So it's actually the fastest growing city of all the ones. I got a bunch of stuff that's tracking the metrics and I have it all charted. So I can tell that Dallas is growing faster, but it's kind of more so within Dallas, right? It's more so if I was going to take Dallas as a pie and cut it into a pizza, South Dallas, there's a very dense amount out of those 2,000 units, there might be 400 of them that are in this like 10% chunk. And I have a couple of houses in there, and those are definitely the ones that seem to have being the most impactful. But the reality is people aren't picking, we talked about amenities and like, they're not going to pay more. But ultimately, if there was just a base level, like clean, quiet house everywhere, they're all identical, people are going based on where their jobs are. So one of my actually biggest issues where we have people who move in and then they move out in a couple of days, because it happens, is they're like, I didn't realize how far it was from my job. Even though PadSplit has a function where you can go and say, all right, here's your job. It's this many minutes. People don't see it, don't use it. So one of the things we're going to start changing in our onboarding process is we have them fill out a form. We like basically tell them, hey, this is the street. Please check your distance to your job to see if it's going to work, because it's happened in one house that's gone live right now. It's happened 3 times out of 8 move-ins where the people are like, I didn't realize this is further than I was going to think. And great house. They move out, and then you had a move-in fee you charge, so you break even. But saturation-wise, I think it's really location-based more than anything. And so I would look at not necessarily a zip code. You almost have to look at like the area, because it could be more than one zip code, and see what that looks like. It takes a little bit of due diligence, obviously. One thing I have seen to add to that is when I went and bought a house, when I originally looked at the data on PadSplit, I'm like, oh, this area looks great. The prices are here. The fill rate is this. By the time I bought the house, renovated it, if you're doing this fast, it's 4, 5, 6+ months with permits. By the time I was ready to go live, the data on the field changed, and there's really not much you can do about that. The price is compressed. occupancy time length went up, it is what it is. So you can have all the plans in the world, but then time happens.
Yeah. Okay. And maybe to get tactical here. So since you are in acquisition mode, or it seems like you're always in acquisition mode, you said you don't like to go fast, but you bought 12 houses last year. So that's pretty awesome. One really cool thing that PadSplit does offer is insights into some of their data. So you can go there and you could zoom in on Dallas and you can see which rooms are where and how occupied they are and things like that. Do you use that feature? And when you're looking at Dallas, when you see all these pins in one area, does that kind of indicate to you, hey, there's too much supply there? Or, hey, that's where everyone wants to live and there's actually demand there and room for me to throw my new property in the mix there too?
Yeah. So I think it depends, right? Like many, obviously, there's like areas that people want to live. So if you know those areas of your city, you're looking there. But you have enough metrics on there. You might look at one zip code as an example, and it says there's 8 units. 8 units is really one house, right? But then the zip code next door has 80 units. Okay, is 80 too much? It depends. Is the occupancy at the bottom, is it still where you want it to be? Is it 80, 85, 90%? If it is, then it's probably not too saturated for that area, right? And then there's also like time to fill. So it gives you like 10 days to first booking, 30 days to 80% full. Those are metrics that either tell you, is that saturated or not? And so I think the issue is because there's so many people growing in that area, maybe it's a good target because it's Bishop Arts area in Dallas, is that number could go from 80 to 160 in 6 months from now by the time you go live, because there's that other many people. And it could happen in every zip code. It's like that 8 can easily go to 80. You're only adding 9 houses over the course of a 6-month period. So it's a moving target. But I think that's really, and something that I've built on our side that we track and will be a feature of Pad Pulse, which is a tool that I'm developing to help hosts, is it's good to look at that on PadSplit, but it's a static snapshot, right? Whereas if you could look and say, all right, what has this zip code done over the last 6 months in a trend graph line for all these components? Is this telling me a good story or not? And so that was something that we've built that is greatly helpful to us, because you might look at it today and you're like, oh, it's not bad. It was twice as good metrics 3 months ago. And so you're like, all right, that's telling me that this is more of a market I probably don't want to be in. But ultimately, it still goes to, can you buy cheap enough? Can you renovate good enough? And can you attract people from those other houses? And I think that's a good question in any market.
Yeah. Cool. Awesome. While you're talking about it, this Pad Pulse product that you're working on here. So in the co-living space, there's lots of technology holes like all over the place. Like short-term rentals, they have a tool for every single little thing. And co-living, we're not so lucky at this point. So honestly, I'm kind of curious. I don't know everything that the platform you're working on here might do. What are you looking to solve, and what does it bring to the users?
Yeah. Being that I'm, a PadSplit host, I'm core focus in the beginning is to help people scale their PadSplit portfolios. So everything from dynamic repricing. PadSplit's got a pilot beta system that is a black box. You don't know how it works. And I've been in that pilot, and I've had rooms get sold for way less than I anticipated, but you can't do anything about it. So dynamic repricing with some more sophisticated strategy rules is a core function. And this is operational right now. All my rooms are repriced every 24 hours automatically and takes into account promotions and various other things. So that's a big one. Second one is automated messages. So anybody who needs to go, if you've used PadSplit, every message from a member or a booking request, you have to go in and manually punch out and reply. So we have automations built around booking requests, because you have a limited time to get back in response with a person to get them into your room, or PadSplit will auto approve them, which is one of the things I don't love about PadSplit. But we have auto response based on that, auto response based off events, like triggered events. So you might say every Friday, email or message everybody through PadSplit and say, hey, trash pickup is tomorrow. Please put it out. That's an example. And you can do all sorts of events. We have automated messages around payment structure, getting them, like things that you would just want to do at scale that you have to do. We're effectively eliminating all repetitive messages, and then also building in keyword base. So if somebody says my HVAC is hot, the system will ping, check the actual HVAC temperature, see if it's connected, come back and tell them it's 71 degrees. It's currently set to this. We do not allow adjustment based on these reasons for the house. So there's keyword driven, event driven, and then and then scheduled. So those are some of the key functionalities that we have now as of early March 2026. This is all stuff that's being tested in beta with a small group, but by the time this episode comes out, we'll likely be live and available. And then we're working on kind of locks and thermostat integrations and a lot of other kind of cool stuff.
Awesome. Yeah. So for the auto messaging, I'm kind of curious, is this just canned, like scripted type replies, or does it use AI at all to make
Yeah,
it?
we have a full AI function built into it as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Awesome. And then just last question I have about it. So it's called Pad Pulse, but is it exclusive for PadSplit, or are there features that work outside of the PadSplit platform?
So for now, it is pretty much exclusive to PadSplit. I'm looking at it from if I was to go make a short-term rental, I probably wouldn't go try to do it myself. I would go on Airbnb. There's a reason. And so, yeah, it's exclusive to PadSplit and Host now. As we build out our hardware integrated functions, some of those features would be available for anybody. And so that's more down the pipeline. But we are taking cool feature requests on our website. If anybody's interested, you can shoot us one and we'll consider it.
Awesome. Cool.
Awesome. Travis, we are heading into the final part of the show, but I do want to know, like, where in 5 years from now, the toughest question ever, like, where do you expect yourself to be?
Where do I expect myself to be?
Yeah. Or your business, or you're both. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I think as it relates to co-living, I'm a little undecided. I'm either going to keep scaling at I'll probably slow down. A house a month was a little wild. I kind of got to a certain level that I wanted to be at. I have a lot of houses still in renovation, right? So out of all those houses, I have 181 rooms. Right now, there's only about 100 live. I have 80 under renovation. So I had 8 renovations going at one time. So I'm kind of just letting those solidify, get the cash back, and then reevaluate the cycle. Honestly, probably like 2 months from now, I'll be looking to buy again. And so I don't know. From there, maybe might take it to probably with a target of 500 rooms. Ultimately, I think that eventually this will become more mainstream and private equity will show up. And when private equity shows up, they're going to want to there'll be several of them will pop up at the same time. And I'm equating what happened in the Amazon world, the cannabis equipment world I've been in. The same thing happened. Things get big. All the big players come in. They want to dump a ton of money into it. And so somebody's going to say, I want to be the fastest company to have 10,000 rooms. They're going to go to everybody with 500 rooms and say, I will pay you a 2x premium over what exists. And at that point might be the time to exit the whole portfolio or just a large portion of the portfolio. But that's kind of how I envision things will play out eventually.
Yeah. So, follow-up question there real quick, Travis. So thinking about the private equity thing, I think that's super interesting. And yeah, I'm sure at some point we would love to sell to something like that. How do you think they're going to view permitting? Because co-living in general, there's lots of unpermitted work going on. And we've talked on the show recently about how we are pulling permits. Now we think that's useful in working with the city and all that. But what do you think private equity would think about it? Are they going to want permitted properties, or would they kind of risk unpermitted work?
It's a great question. My view on permits at this point, I come in the king of red tags, is you should get them from the gate. Just get a permit, and it'll just, even though it takes more time, ultimately it'll save you more time and headache. And for this reason, I'm sure ultimately they'll probably not care about permits, but you probably will get an additional premium for having permits, right? I could see them looking at a house and saying, okay, you've had these houses operational for 3 years. Show me what your maintenance records have been. And if you have records that were like, we constantly had a bunch of problems with electrical and plumbing, et cetera, there might be like, yeah, we either don't want that one or we're going to give you a lower multiple for it. That's what I would do if I was in their shoes. If they were buying, if they saw like, okay, like the house is fine and they haven't had that many issues, they don't need to have permits to buy it. And they could get as is permits. So they could later come in and say, hey, we're getting a permit and filed. And that way it would be what it was. But I would probably be looking at the maintenance records the same way you're going to buy a car, right? If you're buying a car, unless you have the maintenance records, you're probably not going to get a premium for it.
Cool. Awesome. All right. Well, Craig, you ready to start wrapping things up?
Yeah, Travis, thank you. Thank you for that. And it's exciting to kind of hear where you see the future is. So let's head into the big three.
All right. Question number 1, Craig.
What's one tool or system you use in your business that you could not live without?
Pad Pulse for sure.
Except your own system.
Secondly, would be Slack. Internally, that's our communication tool, and I've used it for 12 years across different companies. So I'm addicted to Slack.
Cool. Awesome. All right. Question number 2. What's one transaction or maybe roommate horror story that you've experienced, and what did that teach you?
Oh man, we've had a few. I've had a death in one of
one.
my homes. I've had,
Okay.
yeah. Okay. I guess that one is just an unfortunate situation with the death. So it's not too much takeaways from there. Someone move in and then they were tracking feces from their room down the hall to the bathroom, which obviously caused a bunch of issues with other members. And somebody checked in on the guy. Turned out he had C. diff, which is a GI disease that kind of actually messes with you mentally. And so he wasn't really in the right state of mind. Ended up having to be rushed to the hospital. And ultimately, we had to get like a biohazard clean on the property, which for a single room biohazard is about $2,500. And after that, the guy came back and then ended up moving out. And so I don't even think that his total income covered his room. But ultimately, I guess the takeaway from that is somebody had said something a day or two before. This guy seems off mentally, and we were like, okay, so it's possible that we could have been a little more proactive. Somebody gave us feedback about this person, reaching out to them, maybe could have prevented the situation. So I think the takeaway is don't overlook things that could kind of become bigger, especially when it's like mental instability is how it was portrayed at the message ahead of time, turned out to be medically. But yeah, that's a takeaway.
Yeah, and I would echo that. So we've had a couple issues where, folks have brought up, oh, this person mentally, like something's going on, whatever. Every single time, like 2 days later, 2 weeks later, some amount of time later, something has gone down and we've had to get that person removed or have officials come to the property and take care of it. So yeah, the mental stuff, definitely take care of quick and keep it serious for sure.
100%. Outside of this podcast and our community, where are you learning the most about co-living today?
Where am I learning the most about co-living today? Man, I'm in so many different things. I would say I really benefit and like the co-living operations Facebook group. I think Dave Edwards runs that one and puts out a lot of good content and information. He's also mostly, I think, entirely PadSplit. Doesn't really do anything off. So in that, and then I'm still a part of the co-living university, which was the Scale Your Real Estate program. That's another Facebook group, but that's not necessarily a free one to get into. So yeah, both those. And then the third would be the Facebook community for PadSplit. So there's like the PadSplit host official community. So I'd say it's all Facebook at the end of the day, but 3 different groups there.
Cool. All right. And then to close us out here, where can listeners find you, Travis? Where can they learn more about you and connect with you?
Easy to padpulse.io is our website. We can learn more there. You can email me at travis@padpulse.io. You can find me on LinkedIn under Travis Schwartz and learn more about my kind of entrepreneurial history and some of the things I've been into. And yeah, I think that's it.
Boom. Love that. Travis, thank you so much for coming on the show, man. Thanks so much for sharing your story and defending PadSplit for us. Miller and I will have to have a conversation to figure out whether or not we have been convinced. But you make a compelling case, my friend. So just keep crushing it, man. Buying 12 houses in a year is phenomenal. And I kind of love your cadence and love how you think about kind of doing these things in chunks to keep things simple. And hey, hopefully we'll see you in 5 years at some closing table with, I don't know, Bain Capital or something crazy.
There you go. That'd be awesome. Well, appreciate you guys having me. I'll see you later.
Cool. See you, Travis.
See ya.
And that was Travis Schwartz. Miller, what are your thoughts?
After we've duked out our PadSplit versus non-PadSplit ideas, me and Travis are still friends, so all good on that front. But no, really appreciated having a conversation about this opposing platform that we don't necessarily use. It is still awesome to hear about some of the benefits and reasons that you may want to switch to a platform like that. I think that's super beneficial for us because we're always evaluating what's the best thing to do. And at some point that may be the case. And same for the listeners out there. Definitely don't be skewed by my view or Travis's view or whatever. Just take in all this info and see what's best for your situation. I think Travis brought a lot of that today.
100%. Travis really did bring, there was some really good tidbits that he brought in there. I think offering, my favorite thing that he probably said, and I love the little nuggets that you can actually take away, is offering people that are moving out a 10% discount or whatever on rent going forward. That's such a win-win because the vacancy is going to cost you more than that 10%, almost for sure. Almost for sure, right? But if you do include cleaning, the actual vacancy itself, and all the things that he mentioned, and if you're on PadSplit, for sure. And so I think that's a really good, that was like probably my favorite tidbit that he said. And then also I just love kind of how his brain works in chunks. Okay, I'm in acquisition mode, I'm in renovation mode, I'm in room filling mode, back to acquisition mode. I think that's a pretty scalable way to do things. The way that he's scaling, it doesn't sound like he wants to explode to 10,000 rooms, but he wants to get to 500. I think he could easily get there in 2 to 3 years with that method of chunking.
Yeah, and he is running things by himself, or I'm sure he has a team under him and everything. But Craig and I have the advantage of we can both put our brains full time, 40 hours a week towards our ambitions. And Travis might have to split that, the acquisitions and the ops and all that might have to spread that all over himself. And so by him like chunking things like this, I think maybe that is how he's able to wear these different hats and still scale in the manner that he is.
100%, man. 100%. Cool, man. Anything else you want to talk about before we head off for the week?
No, man, I'm ready to get out of here.
All right. Where can people find you, bro?
Yeah, you can find me at Miller McSwain on Instagram and all the other places if you guys want to look for some co-living content throughout the week. So we're posting.
Are you on TikTok?
We're technically on TikTok. Yes. My wife found it the other day and she's, you have a TikTok? And I was like, yeah, I think so. So we're not super duper active. So definitely go to the Instagram side, but might see you on TikTok.
You're not shaking your booty on TikTok?
No, that's the private channel. Yeah, you got to, that's invite only. Yeah.
You got to pay. You got to pay for that one?
Yeah, you got to pay a lot. Yeah.
A lot. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I can't afford that. All right, Miller. Well, it's good talking with you, bro. If you guys haven't already, please leave us a rating and review on whatever show or whatever platform you're on. And if you could just share it with one friend that you're trying to get into co-living, tremendously helps us. And it helps us bring more guests on the show, helps us spread this co-living knowledge throughout the universe. So knowledge. All right. We'll see you next week, man.
See ya.